The blood on the telegram still looked fresh when Benjamin Preston crumpled it in his fist. Standing in the doorway of what used to be his home in Camp Verde, Arizona, watching his wife ride away with the banker who had been his friend since childhood. It was August of 1882, and the desert heat did nothing to thaw the ice that had formed around his heart, as he realized that everything he had built over the past 6 years meant nothing to the woman who had promised to stand by him through drought and prosperity alike. She had not even bothered to take her wedding ring, leaving it on the kitchen table beside a note that explained in cold, precise handwriting that she deserved better than a cattle rancher who smelled of livestock and dirt, that Marcus Whitley could give her the life of comfort she had always wanted, and that she hoped Benjamin would understand someday. He did not understand. He could not understand how the woman he had loved since he was 20 years old, the woman he had married in the small church on the edge of town, could simply decide that their vows meant nothing. Benjamin stood 6 feet tall with broad shoulders earned from years of working the land, his dark hair perpetually touched with dust, his blue eyes now hollow with a betrayal that cut deeper than any knife. He had given her everything he had, worked himself to exhaustion to make their ranch successful, and it had not been enough. The next 3 months passed in a blur of whiskey and isolation. Benjamin let his ranch hands manage the cattle while he sat in the empty house, surrounded by furniture that still smelled like her perfume, staring at walls that echoed with her laughter. The other ranchers in Camp Verde tried to reach out, but he pushed them all away, convinced that trust was nothing more than a beautiful lie people told themselves before the inevitable betrayal. His younger brother came from Prescott to check on him, but Benjamin sent him away with harsh words he would later regret, too consumed by his own pain to accept comfort from anyone. It was November when he finally forced himself back to work, though his heart was not in it. The cattle needed tending regardless of his broken spirit, and the ranch would fail if he continued to wallow in self-pity. He rode out to the northern pasture, where his men had reported seeing signs of wolves, his Winchester rifle resting across his saddle, his mind still miles away from the task at hand. The Arizona landscape stretched endlessly around him, all red rocks and scrub brush under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Once he had found beauty in this harsh land. Now it just seemed empty. The sound of a horse screaming in terror pulled him from his dark thoughts. Benjamin spurred his mare forward, racing toward the source of the noise, and crested a small rise to see a scene that made his blood run cold. A wagon had overturned in a dried creek bed, one wheel shattered, supplies scattered across the ground. A woman in a torn green dress was trying to control a panicked horse still tangled in its harness, while 3 wolves circled closer, their yellow eyes fixed on the easy prey. She had a rifle in her hands, but it was clear from the way she held it that she either did not know how to use it or it had jammed. Benjamin did not hesitate. He raised his Winchester and fired 3 times in rapid succession, the shots echoing across the desert like thunder. 2 wolves dropped immediately, dead before they hit the ground. The third yelped and ran, disappearing into the brush with its tail between its legs. The woman's horse finally broke free from the harness and bolted, leaving her standing alone amid the wreckage of her wagon, still clutching the useless rifle, her chest heaving with terrified breaths. He rode down carefully, keeping his rifle ready in case the third wolf decided to return with friends. Up close, he could see that she was perhaps 25 years old, with auburn hair that had come loose from its pins and hung in tangled waves around her face. Her green dress was expensive, but now ruined, torn in several places and covered in dust. What struck him most were her eyes, a warm brown that reminded him of honey, but filled with a kind of pain he recognized all too well. This was not just fear from the wolf attack. This was something deeper, older, a wound that had not yet scarred over. "Are you hurt?" His voice came out rougher than he intended, months of disuse making it sound harsh. She shook her head, then seemed to reconsider. "My ankle. When the wagon overturned. I think it might be sprained." She spoke with an Eastern accent, refined and educated, completely out of place in the Arizona desert. Benjamin dismounted and approached slowly, the way he would approach a spooked horse. "I am Benjamin Preston. My ranch is about 2 miles south of here. Let me take a look at that ankle." Diana Kimball. She sat down heavily on a large rock, exhaustion and pain written clearly on her face. When she lifted her skirt enough for him to examine her ankle, he could see it was already swelling badly. Not broken, probably, but she would not be walking on it anytime soon. "We need to get you to town. The doctor can look at this properly." He glanced at the overturned wagon. "Were you traveling alone?" Something flickered across her face, pain and anger mixing together. "Yes. I left Tucson 3 days ago. I was trying to reach Prescott, where my sister lives." She paused, then added with bitter emphasis, "My husband does not know where I have gone, and I intend to keep it that way." There it was. The same kind of betrayal he heard in his own voice when he talked about his wife. Benjamin looked at Diana Kimball more carefully, seeing past the expensive dress and refined manners to the woman beneath. She was running, just as he had wanted to run but could not, because the ranch tied him to this place. She had been hurt by someone who promised to love her, just as he had been hurt. "Can you ride?" he asked. "I have done so since I was a child." "Then let us get you on my horse. Camp Verde is closer than Prescott, and you need that ankle tended to before you go anywhere else." He helped her stand, supporting her weight as she hobbled over to his mare. She was tall for a woman, perhaps 5 feet 7 inches, and slender despite the fullness of her dress. When he lifted her into the saddle, she made no sound of complaint, despite what must have been considerable pain. Benjamin gathered what supplies he could salvage from the wagon, tying them behind the saddle, then swung up behind Diana. She stiffened at the contact, and he kept as much distance between them as the saddle would allow, understanding instinctively that she had been hurt badly enough to distrust any man's touch. They rode in silence toward Camp Verde, the sun beginning its descent toward the western horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice quiet, "for saving my life. Those wolves would have killed me. Anyone would have done the same, perhaps, but you were the one who was there." She paused, then added, "You said your name was Preston. Are you related to the Prestons who own the largest cattle ranch in this area?" "That would be me, though it is not as large as it used to be. I am sorry. Times have been difficult for ranchers, I understand." Benjamin did not respond. He did not want to explain that the ranch had suffered not because of economic hardship, but because he had let it fall apart while he drowned in whiskey and self-pity. They rode on in silence until the buildings of Camp Verde came into view, adobe structures clustered around a main street that was little more than packed dirt. The town had grown up around an army post that had been abandoned a year earlier, and it still had the rough, unfinished quality of a place that had not yet decided whether it would thrive or fade away into the desert. He took her directly to Dr. Harrison's house, a neat adobe building on the edge of town. The doctor, a gray-haired man in his 50s who had served as an army surgeon before settling in Camp Verde, answered the door himself and took one look at Diana's swollen ankle before ushering them inside. Benjamin waited in the parlor while the doctor examined her in his office, sitting on a horsehair sofa and staring at his hands, wondering why he had gotten involved. The smart thing would have been to deliver her to the doctor and leave immediately, to avoid any entanglement with this woman and her obvious troubles. But he did not leave. He sat there until the doctor emerged, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Badly sprained but not broken," Dr. Harrison reported. "She needs to stay off it for at least a week, preferably 2. I have wrapped it and given her something for the pain. She also has some bruising on her ribs from the wagon accident, but nothing serious." He paused, studying Benjamin with shrewd eyes. "She says she has no money and nowhere to stay. Her purse was lost when the wagon overturned." Of course it was. Benjamin closed his eyes briefly, knowing what he was about to do was foolish. "I have room at the ranch. She can stay there until her ankle heals and she can continue to Prescott." "That is generous of you, Ben. Though I suspect the gossips will have a field day with a young widow staying at your ranch." "She is a widow?" "So she says. Her husband died 6 months ago in Tucson." The doctor's tone suggested he had his doubts about that story, but he was too professional to say so outright. Benjamin thought about the way Diana had spoken of her husband, the anger in her voice when she said he did not know where she had gone. A widow would not speak that way, but it was none of his business. He had his own pain to deal with. He did not need to take on hers as well. Yet when Diana emerged from the office, leaning heavily on a crutch the doctor had provided, he found himself offering his arm to help her back to the horse. She looked at him with those honey-colored eyes, searching his face for something, then nodded slowly and accepted his help. The ride back to the ranch was longer than the ride to town, the sun setting and stars beginning to emerge in the vast Arizona sky. Diana sat in front of him, and he could feel the tension in her body, the way she held herself rigidly to avoid any unnecessary contact. He understood that too, the need to maintain distance, to protect what little was left of a broken heart. His ranch house was a sprawling adobe structure he had built with his own hands, large enough for the family he had hoped to have someday. Now, it just felt empty. Rooms full of furniture no one used, and a kitchen where he barely bothered to cook. He helped Diana down from the horse and into the house, settling her in the guest room that had never held a guest. The room was clean at least. His housekeeper, Mrs. Garcia, came twice a week to make sure the place did not fall completely into disorder. "I will sleep in the bunkhouse with my men," Benjamin said from the doorway. "You will have the house to yourself. Mrs. Garcia will be here in the morning to help you with whatever you need." "That is not necessary," Diana protested. "This is your home. I cannot drive you out of it. I have been sleeping in the bunkhouse for months anyway. It makes no difference." It was not quite true, but close enough. She studied him for a long moment, and he had the uncomfortable feeling that she could see through him, past the gruff exterior to the wounded man beneath. "You were betrayed too," she said softly. It was not a question. Benjamin's jaw tightened. "Get some rest, Mrs. Kimball. We can talk in the morning." He left before she could say anything else, retreating to the bunkhouse where his ranch hands were already bedding down for the night. They looked at him with curiosity, but knew better than to ask questions. Benjamin had made it clear over the past few months that his personal life was not up for discussion. But lying on his bunk in the darkness, listening to the snoring of his men and the distant howl of coyotes, Benjamin could not stop thinking about Diana Kimball. There was something about her, beyond the obvious beauty, that had gotten under his skin. Perhaps it was the recognition of shared pain, the understanding that she knew exactly what it felt like to have someone you loved tear your heart out and leave you bleeding. Or perhaps it was simply that, for the first time in months, he had felt something other than numbness and anger. He had felt protective, useful, needed in a way that had nothing to do with cattle or ranch work. It was a dangerous feeling. He had sworn to himself that he would never trust another woman, never open himself up to that kind of hurt again. The smart thing would be to avoid Diana Kimball as much as possible while she recovered, to maintain a polite distance until she could leave for Prescott and disappear from his life forever. But he had never been particularly smart when it came to matters of the heart. Morning came with the roosters crowing and the smell of coffee brewing in the main house. Benjamin washed up at the pump behind the bunkhouse, shaved for the first time in a week, and found himself taking extra care with his appearance before walking up to the house. Mrs. Garcia was already there, a plump Mexican woman in her 50s who had been working for him since he first bought the ranch. She greeted him with raised eyebrows and a knowing smile. "So, you finally bring a woman home," she said in Spanish accented English. "About time." "It is not like that. She was attacked by wolves. I am just helping her until she can travel again." Of course. Mrs. Garcia's smile said she did not believe a word of it. "She is very beautiful, this woman, and she has sad eyes, like you. Maybe you can be sad together and then not be sad anymore, yes?" "Mrs. Garcia," Benjamin said with as much patience as he could muster, "please just make sure she has what she needs, and do not start any rumors. She is a married woman." Probably, maybe. He was not actually sure what her true situation was. "Married women do not run away to Prescott alone in a wagon," Mrs. Garcia observed shrewdly, but she said nothing more, bustling off to prepare breakfast. Benjamin found Diana in the kitchen, dressed in the same green dress from yesterday, but with her hair now neatly pinned up. She had managed to navigate from the bedroom on her crutch, and she stood looking out the window at the ranch spread before her, the corrals and outbuildings and the vast expanse of land beyond. She turned when she heard him enter, and he saw that her face was drawn with pain despite whatever medicine the doctor had given her. "Good morning," she said. "I hope you do not mind that I made myself at home. Mrs. Garcia insisted I sit down, but I feel as though I have imposed enough without making everyone wait on me hand and foot." "You are not imposing, and you need to keep that ankle elevated. Doctor's orders." He pulled out a chair at the kitchen table. "Please, sit." She hesitated, then did as he asked, propping her injured ankle up on another chair with a wince. Benjamin poured her coffee and then stood awkwardly, unsure what to do with himself. Normally, he would be out working by now, but he found himself reluctant to leave. "Your ranch is beautiful," Diana said, wrapping her hands around the coffee cup, as though seeking warmth despite the temperate morning. "How long have you owned it?" 6 years. Built most of it myself." He paused. "My wife left 3 months ago. Ran off with a banker from town. In case you were wondering why a married man is living in his bunkhouse. The words came out harsher than he intended, surprising him. He had not talked about it with anyone except his brother, and even then, only briefly. But something about Diana made him want to speak the truth, to acknowledge the wound that still bled. Her expression softened with understanding. My husband is alive and well in Tucson, as far as I know. He is also living with the woman he claimed was just his business partner, in the house I decorated with my own hands. She took a sip of coffee, her hands trembling slightly. I found them together in our bedroom. He did not even have the decency to lie about it. He told me I was boring, that I had lost my spark, that a man needs variety. He expected me to simply accept it, to live in the house and play the dutiful wife while he carried on his affair for everyone to see. Benjamin sat down across from her, the words hitting him like physical blows. I am sorry. As am I, for both of us. She met his eyes, and in that moment, there was a connection between them that went deeper than words. They understood each other in a way that no one else could, bound together by betrayal and heartbreak. Mrs. Garcia bustled in with breakfast, eggs and bacon and fresh bread, and the moment broke. They ate in companionable silence, the awkwardness fading into something more comfortable. After breakfast, Benjamin insisted that Diana rest in the parlor with her ankle elevated while he went to deal with ranch business. He spent the day working with unusual focus, repairing fences and checking on the cattle, trying not to think about the woman in his house. But his mind kept drifting back to her, wondering what she was doing, if she was comfortable, if her ankle hurt too much. When he returned to the house that evening, he found Diana sitting in the parlor with a book from his shelf, though she did not seem to be reading it. Instead, she stared into the fireplace where Mrs. Garcia had laid a fire against the November chill, her expression distant and sad. She looked up when he entered, and he saw that she had been crying. I am sorry, she said quickly, wiping at her eyes. This is foolish of me. I should be stronger than this. Benjamin sat down in the chair across from her, suddenly exhausted. If being strong means not feeling pain, then I have been failing at it for 3 months. She laughed, a broken sound that held no humor. We are quite a pair, are we not? The betrayed and the broken. I suppose we are. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. Why were you going to Prescott? To your sister? Diana nodded. Margaret married a merchant there 2 years ago. She has been begging me to leave Thomas for months since she found out about his affair. I finally found the courage to do it last week. I packed what I could in the wagon, withdrew what little money I had from my personal account, and left. I did not even leave him a note, let him wonder where I went. Do you think he will come looking for you? I do not know. Perhaps. He is a proud man, and he will not like the embarrassment of having his wife run away. But he is also lazy, and Prescott is a long journey. I am hoping he will decide I am not worth the effort. She pulled a blanket more tightly around her shoulders. I am hoping for a lot of things that may not come true. They talked long into the evening, sharing stories of their marriages and the slow realization that the people they loved were not who they had believed them to be. Diana told him about growing up in Boston, the daughter of a textile merchant, and how she had met Thomas Kimball at a society party and been swept off her feet by his charm and good looks. She had thought herself lucky to marry him, to move to Tucson, where he had business interests in mining. It had taken her 2 years to realize that his charm was nothing more than a mask, that beneath it he was selfish and cruel in small ways, that added up to something unbearable. Benjamin told her about meeting Clara at a church social, how she had seemed so sweet and loving, how he had worked himself to exhaustion to give her the life she wanted. He had thought they were happy, right up until the day he came home to find her packing her bags. Even now he could not understand what he had done wrong, what he could have done differently. You did nothing wrong, Diana said softly when he finished. Some people are simply incapable of being satisfied, no matter what you give them. It is not your fault that she could not see what she had. I could say the same to you about your husband. She smiled, the first genuine smile he had seen from her. Perhaps we should both try to believe it. That night, Benjamin returned to the bunkhouse feeling lighter than he had in months. Talking to someone who understood, who had been through the same kind of pain, made it easier to bear somehow. He lay in his bunk thinking about Diana, about her honey-colored eyes and the way her smile transformed her face, and realized with a start that he was attracted to her. Not just physically, though she was beautiful, but to who she was as a person, to her strength in the face of heartbreak, her determination to start over rather than accept a life that made her miserable. It was too soon. He knew that. They were both too raw, too wounded to think about anything like romance. But he could not deny that she had awakened something in him that he thought was dead forever. The days fell into a pattern. Benjamin would work during the day, coming back to the house for meals that Mrs. Garcia prepared and which he ate with Diana. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, finding common ground in unexpected places. She loved books, and he had a surprisingly large library for a rancher. She played piano, and his mother's instruments still sat in the parlor, untouched since Clara had left. She had studied art in Boston, and she admired the landscape paintings that decorated his walls, work by local artists he had commissioned. Diana's ankle healed slowly. After a week, she could put some weight on it, walking around the house without the crutch, though she still limped badly. After 2 weeks, Dr. Harrison declared her on the mend, but cautioned that she should not attempt the long journey to Prescott for at least another week. Benjamin found himself relieved rather than impatient, and he suspected Diana felt the same way. Neither of them was in a hurry for her to leave. It was late November, 3 weeks after the wolf attack, when everything changed. They were sitting in the parlor after dinner, Diana playing his mother's piano, while he pretended to read a book, but was actually just watching her. She had borrowed a dress from Mrs. Garcia, a simple blue cotton that suited her far better than the ruined green silk had. Her hair was down, falling in soft waves around her shoulders, and her face was relaxed in a way he had not seen before. She looked happy, or at least content, and he realized that he felt the same way. When she finished playing, she turned to find him watching her and blushed. "I am sorry. I get carried away sometimes. My mother always said I played too loudly." "You play beautifully." He closed the book and set it aside. "Diana, I need to ask you something." She went still, wariness creeping into her expression. "What is it? Why are you really still here? Your ankle has been well enough to travel for days now. The doctor said so himself. Yet you have not mentioned leaving." The color drained from her face. "Do you want me to go?" "No." The word came out more forcefully than he intended. "No, I do not want you to go. That is the problem. I should want you to go. You are a married woman, and I am a married man, and the gossips in town are already talking about us. But I do not want you to leave. I look forward to coming back to the house every day, knowing you will be here. I look forward to our conversations and your terrible jokes, and the way you bite your lip when you are concentrating on the piano. And I hope, that maybe you feel the same way." Diana stared at him, her eyes wide and shining with unshed tears. "I am terrified," she whispered. "I am terrified because I do feel the same way. I feel safe here, Benjamin. I feel like myself again, like the woman I was before Thomas spent 3 years grinding me down into nothing. When I am with you, I remember what it is like to laugh, to enjoy simple things, to feel like I matter. And I do not want to give that up to go live with my sister and be a burden on her family." He stood and crossed to the piano, kneeling beside her so they were at eye level. "You would never be a burden. Not here. Not anywhere. You are one of the strongest people I have ever met. I do not feel strong. I feel like I am barely holding myself together. That is what strength is, holding yourself together when everything is falling apart." He took her hand carefully, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She did not. "I am not asking for anything you are not ready to give, but stay. Stay as long as you want. We can figure out the rest later." She turned her hand in his, lacing their fingers together. "What about your wife? What about Thomas? We are both still married." "My wife made her choice when she left with another man, and your husband made his choice when he betrayed you. We can get divorces. It might take time, but we can do it." Divorce. She said the word like it was foreign, tasting it on her tongue. "My family would never speak to me again." Would that be such a loss? A family that would rather you stay in a miserable marriage than find happiness? Diana laughed, that same broken sound from weeks ago, but this time it held a hint of genuine amusement. "You make it sound so simple." "It is not simple, but it is possible." He squeezed her hand gently. "Stay, Diana. Please." She looked at him for a long moment, searching his face, and he let her see everything he felt. The attraction, yes, but also the deeper connection, the understanding, the hope for something better than what they had both lost. Finally, she nodded. I will stay. He should have felt victorious, but instead he just felt relieved. He stood, still holding her hand, and impulsively bent to kiss her forehead. She smelled like soap and vanilla, simple and clean, and he felt her tremble at the contact. When he pulled back, her eyes were closed, her expression peaceful. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For reminding me what kindness feels like." Benjamin went to bed that night in the bunkhouse, feeling like something fundamental had shifted. They had not made any promises, had not even kissed properly, but they had acknowledged what was growing between them. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure, this tentative step towards something new. The next morning, he found Diana in the kitchen making breakfast, humming to herself. Mrs. Garcia had the day off, and Diana had apparently decided to take over cooking duties. She looked comfortable and domestic, and Benjamin felt his heart clench with an emotion he was not ready to name. "You should not be on your feet so much," he said, though he made no move to stop her. "My ankle is nearly healed, and I need to earn my keep somehow. I have been imposing on your hospitality for weeks." She set a plate of eggs and bacon in front of him, then poured coffee. "Besides, I like cooking. Thomas always insisted we have servants do everything. He said it was beneath me to work in the kitchen. I never told him that I found it peaceful." They ate together, falling into easy conversation about the ranch and the cattle and the minor dramas of life in Camp Verde. After breakfast, Diana insisted on helping with the chores, and Benjamin found himself showing her around the ranch, introducing her to his horses and his men. She was a natural with the animals, gentle and unafraid, and his ranch hands warmed to her quickly, tipping their hats and calling her Miss Diana with genuine respect. It was Carlos, his foreman, who pulled Benjamin aside later that afternoon. "Boss, I know it is not my place to say anything, but that woman is good for you. I have not seen you smile in months. Whatever is happening, do not let her go." Benjamin clapped him on the shoulder, unable to argue. Diana was good for him. She made him want to be better, to heal instead of wallowing in his pain, and he hoped desperately that he was good for her too. December brought cooler weather to the Arizona desert, and with it, complications. Benjamin rode into town for supplies and found himself cornered by Pastor Williams outside the general store. The pastor was a stern man in his 60s who had presided over Benjamin's wedding and had been vocal in his disapproval of Clara's adultery. "Benjamin, I need to speak with you about the situation at your ranch," the pastor said without preamble. "What situation would that be?" "The young woman living in your house. People are talking. People always talk. Diana is a guest who was injured on my land. I am helping her until she can travel. There is nothing improper about it." Pastor Williams frowned. "You are still a married man, Benjamin, and from what I understand, so is she. Regardless of what your wife did, you have a responsibility to uphold moral standards. Having an unrelated woman living in your house creates the appearance of impropriety." Benjamin felt his temper rising, but forced it down. "I am sleeping in the bunkhouse. Mrs. Garcia is there during the day. Diana has been nothing but respectful. If people want to gossip, that is their problem, not mine. It becomes your problem when it affects the standing of this church and this community. I am asking you, as your pastor, to send her away, or at least make proper arrangements for her to stay somewhere more appropriate." "And where would that be? The hotel? She has no money, with her sister in Prescott. Her ankle was not healed enough for travel until recently, and even now it would be difficult. Or perhaps you would prefer I had just left her in the desert to be eaten by wolves." "Of course not. But there must be some solution that does not involve her living unchaperoned in your home." Benjamin stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. "Diana Kimball is under my protection. She will stay at my ranch as long as she wishes. If people have a problem with that, they can take it up with me directly. And if you have a problem with it, Pastor, perhaps you should spend less time worrying about the appearance of sin and more time worrying about actual sin. Like the fact that my wife committed adultery and the man she ran off with is still attending your church every Sunday without a word of condemnation." He walked away before the pastor could respond, anger and frustration making his hands shake as he loaded supplies into his wagon. The confrontation had rattled him more than he wanted to admit. Not because he cared what Pastor Williams thought, but because it forced him to confront the reality of his situation with Diana. They were both still married to other people. What they were building, this fragile connection, was happening in a legal and moral gray area that could cause them both serious problems. When he returned to the ranch, Diana took one look at his face and knew something was wrong. What happened? He told her about the conversation with the pastor, watching her expression shift from concern to resignation. "I knew this would happen eventually," she said quietly. "I should go to Prescott. I have imposed on you long enough." "You are not imposing, and you are not going anywhere unless you want to." He sat down heavily in his chair, exhausted. "But we need to face reality. We are both still married. Until that changes, there is going to be talk, and it is going to make things difficult for both of us." Diana twisted her hands in her lap, a nervous gesture he had come to recognize. "I could write to Thomas and ask him for a divorce. I do not know if he would agree, but I could try. And I can do the same with Clara, though given that she ran off with another man, I suspect the law would be on my side." He paused. "Diana, I need to know what you want, not what you think you should want, or what would make things easier. What do you actually want?" She looked up at him, and the vulnerability in her eyes nearly undid him. "I want to stay here. I want to build a life that makes me happy instead of spending every day walking on eggshells, afraid of doing something that will set off my husband's temper. I want to wake up in the morning and feel something other than dread, and I want to see where this thing between us goes, even though it terrifies me." She took a shaky breath. "But I do not want to ruin your reputation or cause you problems. You have been nothing but kind to me. I could not bear it if I repaid that kindness by making your life more difficult." Benjamin crossed to her and took both her hands in his, pulling her gently to her feet. "You are not ruining anything. If anything, you have given me a reason to care about life again. These past few weeks with you have been the happiest I have been in years. So, if you want to stay, then stay. We will face whatever comes together." She leaned into him, resting her head against his chest, and he wrapped his arms around her carefully, giving her the comfort of his embrace without demanding anything in return. They stood like that for a long time, finding strength in each other, and Benjamin felt something shift inside him. This was not just attraction or shared pain anymore. This was something deeper, something that felt dangerously close to love. The next week passed in a flurry of activity. Benjamin consulted with a lawyer in Prescott who specialized in divorce cases, and learned that, because Clara had committed adultery and abandoned him, he had strong grounds for divorce. The process would take several months, possibly longer, but it was definitely possible. Diana wrote to Thomas a letter that took her 3 days to compose, laying out her reasons for leaving and requesting a divorce. She also wrote to her sister in Prescott, explaining the situation and asking for her understanding. The responses came in early January of 1883. Thomas sent a furious letter accusing Diana of abandoning him and threatening to drag her name through the mud if she pursued a divorce. He claimed that she had no grounds, that his relationship with his business partner was innocent, and that she was the one who had broken their marriage vows by leaving. The letter was full of manipulative language designed to make her doubt herself, and Benjamin watched her hands shake as she read it. "He is trying to scare you," Benjamin said gently. "He knows he has no legal leg to stand on. You found him in bed with another woman. That is grounds for divorce in any court." "He is very good at making me doubt myself," Diana said, her voice small. "For 3 years, he convinced me that everything wrong in our marriage was my fault, that I was not pretty enough, not interesting enough, not submissive enough. Even now, reading this, part of me wonders if he is right." Benjamin took the letter from her hands and tore it in half. "He is not right. He is a bully and a cheat, and he does not deserve you. You are beautiful and fascinating and strong, and the fact that he could not see that is his failure, not yours." She looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "How do you always know exactly what to say?" "Because I see you, the real you, not the person your husband tried to make you into." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. "You are extraordinary. Das Diana Kimball. Do not let him convince you otherwise." She kissed him. It was sudden and unexpected, her lips soft against his, and for a moment he froze in surprise. Then he kissed her back, pouring everything he felt into it, all the longing and hope and desperate affection that had been building for weeks. She made a small sound in the back of her throat and pressed closer, her hands fisting in his shirt, and he felt something break open inside him, all the walls he had built around his heart crumbling to dust. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Diana laughed shakily. "I am sorry. I should not have done that. We are still technically married to other people. I am not sorry." He rested his forehead against hers, his arms wrapped securely around her waist. "I have wanted to do that for weeks. So have I." She pulled back just enough to look at him. "Benjamin, I am falling in love with you. I know it is too soon and too complicated and probably a terrible idea, but I cannot help it." His heart felt like it might burst from his chest. "It is not a terrible idea, and I am falling in love with you too. Have been, probably, since the moment I saw you trying to fight off those wolves with an empty rifle." They kissed again, slower this time, exploring and savoring. It felt like coming home after a long journey, like finding something precious that he thought he had lost forever. When they finally separated, Diana was smiling, genuinely happy in a way he had never seen before. "So, what do we do now?" she asked. "Now we file for our divorces and we wait. And while we wait, we build a life together, starting today." The letter from Diana's sister arrived 2 days later, and unlike Thomas's angry screed, it was full of love and support. Margaret wrote that she had suspected for years that Thomas was mistreating Diana, and she was relieved that her sister had finally found the courage to leave. She offered to testify in any divorce proceedings if needed, and she expressed her hope that Diana had found somewhere safe to stay. The letter ended with an invitation to visit Prescott whenever Diana was ready, and a postscript saying that Margaret could not wait to meet the rancher who had rescued her sister from wolves and apparently stolen her heart, based on the way Diana wrote about him. Benjamin filed for divorce in February, a process that required him to ride to Tucson and testify before a judge about Clara's adultery. It was humiliating to lay bare the details of his failed marriage before strangers, but the judge was sympathetic and granted him a decree of divorce to be finalized after a 6-month waiting period. Clara did not contest it. According to the lawyer, she and Marcus Whitley had moved to California and had no interest in fighting the divorce. Diana's case was more complicated. Thomas contested her petition, claiming that she had abandoned him and demanding she return to Tucson. The judge ordered a hearing, which required Diana to travel back to the city she had fled. Benjamin insisted on going with her, and they made the journey in early March, taking 3 days to travel from Camp Verde to Tucson by stagecoach. The hearing was brutal. Thomas's lawyer painted Diana as an unstable woman who had abandoned her husband on a whim, while Thomas himself played the role of wounded spouse to perfection. But Diana had prepared for this. She had written down every incident of emotional abuse, every cruel word and manipulative tactic, and she recounted them calmly and clearly on the witness stand. She also had the testimony of her former housekeeper, a woman who had witnessed Thomas's affair, and who was willing to testify that she had seen him in compromising positions with his business partner on multiple occasions. The judge, a stern woman in her 50s who had little patience for philandering husbands, ruled in Diana's favor. She granted the divorce petition and issued a scathing rebuke to Thomas, telling him that he should be ashamed of himself for trying to force his wife to remain in a marriage he had destroyed through his own infidelity. The decree would be finalized after a 6-month waiting period, same as Benjamin's. They returned to Camp Verde exhausted but triumphant. Diana had faced her abuser and won, and the relief on her face was palpable. That night, they sat together on the porch of the ranch house, watching the stars emerge in the vast Arizona sky, and Benjamin felt at peace for the first time since Clara had left. 6 months, Diana said softly, and then we are both free. 6 months, he agreed. What do you want to do when they are over? She turned to look at him, her honey-colored eyes reflecting the starlight. I want to marry you. I want to wake up every morning in this house and know that I am home. I want to help you run this ranch and build a life that makes us both happy. I want everything, Benjamin, everything we were both denied in our first marriages. He pulled her close, kissing her temple. Then that is what we will have. I promise you, Diana. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. I could never regret you. You saved me in more ways than you know. The months that followed were the happiest Benjamin could remember. He and Diana settled into a life together, though they maintained separate bedrooms to avoid scandal. Mrs. Garcia acted as a chaperone of sorts, though she winked and smiled knowingly whenever she saw them holding hands or stealing kisses. Diana took over much of the household management, working with Mrs. Garcia to improve the ranch house and make it a true home. She also proved to have a talent for bookkeeping, and she helped Benjamin organize his finances in a way that made the ranch more profitable. They worked together during the day and talked late into the night, learning everything about each other. Diana taught him to appreciate art and music in ways he never had before. He taught her about ranching and the satisfaction of working with animals and the land. They rode together across the desert, exploring the red rocks and hidden canyons, finding beauty in the harsh landscape. The gossip in Camp Verde gradually died down as people saw that Benjamin and Diana were genuinely devoted to each other. Even Pastor Williams eventually softened, visiting the ranch in April to apologize for his harsh words and to offer his congratulations on their upcoming marriages, assuming the divorces went through as planned. In August of 1883, exactly 1 year after Benjamin had found that telegram from Clara, both divorces were finalized. Benjamin received his decree in the mail on a Monday morning. Diana received hers on Thursday. On Saturday, they rode to Prescott together, where Diana's sister and her family lived, and they were married in a small ceremony attended by Margaret, her husband, and a handful of friends. Diana wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself, and Benjamin wore his best suit, the one he had been married in the first time, but which he had cleaned and mended until it looked almost new. As they stood before the minister and said their vows, Benjamin felt tears streaming down his face, overwhelmed by the knowledge that this time it was real. This time, he was marrying someone who truly loved him, who had chosen him not out of convenience or social pressure, but because they understood each other's pain and had healed together. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Benjamin kissed his new bride, he felt like the luckiest man alive. Diana smiled up at him through her own tears, and he saw his future reflected in her eyes, a future full of love and trust and all the things they had both thought were lost to them forever. They spent a week in Prescott with Diana's sister, enjoying the luxury of being a married couple, of sharing a bed and a life without any restrictions or need for propriety. Margaret and her husband were warm and welcoming, and they expressed their approval of Benjamin in no uncertain terms. "You brought my sister back to life," Margaret told him on their last night in Prescott. "When she first wrote to me about leaving Thomas, she sounded so broken, so defeated. But in her letters from your ranch, she sounded like the Diana I remembered from before she married him, happy and full of life. Thank you for that." "She did the same for me," Benjamin replied honestly. "We saved each other." They returned to Camp Verde as Mr. and Mrs. Preston, ready to begin their life together in earnest. The ranch hands threw them a party, complete with music and dancing and far too much whiskey. Carlos gave a toast that had everyone laughing and crying at the same time, talking about how the boss had been a miserable wretch until Miss Diana came along and knocked some sense into him. Benjamin and Diana danced under the stars, holding each other close, and he whispered in her ear all the things he was going to do to her once they were alone. She blushed and laughed and told him he was wicked, but he could see the anticipation in her eyes. Their wedding night was everything Benjamin had dreamed of and more. Diana was passionate and giving, and the intimacy between them went far beyond the physical. It was the joining of two souls that had been battered and broken, but had found healing in each other. Afterward, they lay tangled together in his bed, their bed now, and talked about the future they would build together. "I want children," Diana said softly, tracing patterns on his chest. "I want to fill this house with love and laughter, and all the things we never had in our first marriages." "So do I," Benjamin agreed. "As many as you want to give me." "Let us start with one and see how it goes," she said with a laugh. They made love again, slower this time, savoring every touch and kiss. And when they finally fell asleep in each other's arms, Benjamin felt a contentment he had never known before. This was what marriage was supposed to be. This was what love was supposed to feel like. The years that followed were not without challenges. Ranching was hard work, and there were droughts and cattle diseases and all the usual problems that came with trying to make a living from the land. But Benjamin and Diana faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each obstacle they overcame. In the spring of 1884, Diana discovered she was pregnant. Benjamin was so overjoyed he literally swept her off her feet and spun her around, making her laugh and scold him at the same time for being reckless with their baby. He was almost unbearably protective during her pregnancy, hovering and worrying until she finally told him he was driving her mad, and she needed him to trust that she could carry a child without constant supervision. Their son was born in January of 1885, a healthy baby boy with Benjamin's blue eyes and Diana's stubborn chin. They named him James, after Benjamin's father, and he was the light of their lives. Benjamin had never known he could love someone so completely, so unconditionally. Watching Diana with their son, seeing the way she glowed with happiness, he thanked God every day for the wolves that had led him to her. 2 years later, their daughter was born, a tiny thing with Diana's auburn hair and a set of lungs that could wake the entire ranch. They named her Rose, and she completed their family in ways Benjamin had not known were possible. His children would grow up knowing what a real marriage looked like, what genuine love and partnership meant. They would never have to wonder if their parents loved each other or if they were wanted. As the years passed, the ranch prospered. Benjamin and Diana expanded their herd, bought more land, and built their legacy together. They became pillars of the Camp Verde community, respected and admired for their hard work and devotion to each other. The gossip that had once surrounded them was long forgotten, replaced by stories of the couple who had overcome heartbreak to find true love. On their 10th wedding anniversary in August of 1893, Benjamin and Diana stood on the porch of their ranch house, watching their children play in the yard. James was 8 now, tall for his age and already helping with the horses. Rose was 6, spirited and wild, determined to keep up with her older brother in everything he did. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if those wolves had not attacked my wagon?" Diana asked, leaning against her husband's side. Benjamin wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. Every day I am grateful for them. Grateful for every twist of fate that brought you into my life. Even Clara leaving you, even Thomas betraying me, especially that. Because as much as those betrayals hurt, they led us to each other. They taught us what we did not want, what we would never accept in a relationship, and they made us appreciate what we have now even more. He kissed the top of her head. I would go through all that pain again if it meant ending up here, with you, with our children, with this life we have built. Diana turned in his arms to face him, tears shining in her honey-colored eyes. I love you, Benjamin Preston, more than I ever thought it was possible to love another person. And I love you, Diana Preston. You are my heart, my home, my everything. They kissed as the sun set over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the same colors that had filled the sky the day they met. Their children laughed in the yard, their ranch hands sang songs around the bunkhouse, and life went on in all its messy, beautiful glory. Benjamin and Diana had been betrayed by the people they once loved, left broken and bleeding in the wreckage of failed marriages. But they had understood each other's pain, and in that understanding, they had found healing. They had found love, real love, the kind that endured through hardship and grew stronger with each passing year. As the stars emerged one by one in the vast night sky, Benjamin held his wife close and looked out over the land they had claimed together. This was his legacy, not the cattle or the ranch or even the name he would pass to his children. His legacy was the love he shared with Diana, the proof that even the most broken hearts could heal if they found the right person to help them. And as Diana rested her head on his shoulder, content and loved and safe, she knew that she had finally found what she had been searching for all along. Not rescue, not escape, but partnership. Not someone to save her, but someone to stand beside her as she saved herself. In Benjamin, she had found a man who understood that love was not about control or possession, but about trust and respect and choosing each other every single day. Their story was not one of perfection. They argued sometimes, disagreed on things both large and small, but they always came back to each other, always remembered what they had overcome to be together. And in those moments when the past threatened to resurface, when old wounds ached in the quiet of the night, they held each other and remembered that they were no longer the broken people who had met in the desert. They were Benjamin and Diana Preston, husband and wife, partners in every sense of the word, and nothing could take that away from them. The years continued to unfold with grace and joy. By 1895, their ranch had grown to be one of the most successful in the territory. James, now 10 years old, had developed his father's talent with horses and spent every spare moment in the corrals, training and riding with a skill that made Benjamin's heart swell with pride. Rose, at 8, had inherited her mother's artistic eye and could often be found sketching the desert landscape or the ranch animals, her tongue poking out in concentration as she worked. In the spring of that year, Diana discovered she was pregnant again, much to their surprise and delight. At 38, she had thought her childbearing years were behind her, but the doctor confirmed what she had suspected. Benjamin was ecstatic, already planning expansions to the house to accommodate their growing family. Their third child, a boy they named Thomas after Diana's father, who had passed away the previous year, was born in December of 1895. Unlike his sister's dramatic entrance into the world, Thomas arrived quietly in the early morning hours, with Diana's labor so swift that the doctor barely arrived in time. Benjamin held his youngest son and marveled at how life continued to surprise him, how, even after years of happiness, there were still new joys to discover. Diana recovered quickly from the birth, and by the time Thomas was 6 months old, she was back to her usual routines, managing the household and helping Benjamin with the ranch accounts. She had also started a small school in Camp Verde, teaching the children of ranch hands and townspeople who could not afford to send their children away for education. It was something she had always wanted to do, and Benjamin supported her fully, helping her convert one of their unused outbuildings into a classroom. The school was a success, and Diana found great fulfillment in teaching. She loved watching children learn and grow, and she made sure that every student, regardless of their family's financial situation, had access to books and supplies. Benjamin often joked that she was turning Camp Verde into a civilized place, and she would laugh and tell him that civilization and the Wild West were not mutually exclusive. Their marriage continued to deepen with each passing year. The passion that had first drawn them together had matured into something richer, a love that encompassed friendship and respect and a profound understanding of each other. They still made time for romance, stealing moments alone when the children were asleep, riding out to their favorite spot in the hills, where they could watch the sunset and remember the early days of their courtship. In 1899, when James turned 14, he expressed interest in attending a prestigious boarding school in Prescott that focused on agriculture and business management. It was an opportunity that would prepare him to eventually take over the ranch, but it meant being away from home for much of the year. Diana struggled with the decision, not wanting to be separated from her eldest child, but Benjamin reminded her that they had to let their children follow their own paths. "He is growing up," Benjamin said gently, as they discussed it late one night. "We cannot hold on to him forever. The best thing we can do is give him the tools he needs to build his own life." "I know," Diana said, wiping away tears. "It is just so hard. It feels like yesterday that he was a baby in my arms. He will always be our son, no matter how old he gets or where he goes, and he will always know that he has a home here, with us." James went to school in Prescott that fall, and though the house felt emptier without him, he came home for holidays and summers, full of stories about his classes and the friends he had made. Rose missed her brother terribly at first, but she soon found her own interests, helping her mother at the school and developing a talent for teaching that surprised everyone. Little Thomas, meanwhile, grew into a curious and adventurous child who kept everyone on their toes. He had his father's fearlessness and his mother's creativity, a combination that led to frequent scrapes and minor disasters. By the time he was 4 years old, he had already fallen into the horse trough twice, gotten stuck in a tree, and somehow managed to paint the barn cat blue with Diana's art supplies. "He is going to be the death of me," Diana said with exasperated affection after fishing Thomas out of the trough for the second time. "He is just spirited," Benjamin said, trying not to laugh as he wrapped their dripping son in a towel. "Like someone else I know." "I was never that bad," Diana protested, but she was smiling. In 1900, the new century arrived with great fanfare and celebration. Camp Verde threw a party that lasted 3 days, with music and dancing and speeches about progress and the bright future ahead. Benjamin and Diana attended with their children, and as midnight struck on December the 31st, Benjamin pulled his wife into his arms and kissed her, not caring who saw. "To the new century," he said when they broke apart, "and to spending it with you." "To us," Diana agreed, her eyes shining. "To everything we have built and everything we will build together." The early years of the 20th century brought changes to Camp Verde and to the ranch. Arizona was moving toward statehood, and there was talk of new technologies that would revolutionize ranching. Benjamin was open to innovation, but he also valued the traditional methods that had served him well for nearly 20 years. He and Diana discussed every major decision together, her input invaluable in helping him navigate the changing landscape of the cattle business. In 1902, James graduated from his school in Prescott at the age of 17, returning home to work on the ranch full-time. He had grown into a confident young man with his father's strong build and his mother's quick mind. Benjamin felt a deep satisfaction in working alongside his son, teaching him everything he knew about ranching and watching him develop his own ideas and innovations. Rose, meanwhile, had become an accomplished artist, her paintings of desert landscapes sought after by buyers as far away as Phoenix. She was also a gifted teacher, having taken over some of her mother's classes at the school. At 15, she was mature beyond her years, with a quiet strength that reminded Benjamin so much of Diana that it sometimes made his heart ache. Thomas, at 6, was still the wild child of the family, but he was also showing signs of the man he would become. He was fiercely loyal to his siblings, protective of his mother, and worshipful of his father. Benjamin made sure to spend time with each of his children individually, knowing how important it was that they each felt valued and heard. In the summer of 1903, Clara's name came up for the first time in years. Benjamin was in town picking up supplies when he ran into an old acquaintance who mentioned that Clara and Marcus Whitley had returned to Arizona after their venture in California had failed. They were living in Tucson, and according to gossip, their relationship was as troubled as their financial situation. Benjamin felt nothing hearing this news. No anger, no satisfaction, not even curiosity. Clara was part of his past, a chapter that had closed long ago. His life was with Diana and their children, and what happened to his first wife was no longer any concern of his. When he returned home and mentioned it to Diana, she simply shrugged. "The past is past," she said. "We have both moved on to better things." That night, as they lay in bed together, Benjamin reflected on how completely his life had changed since that day in 1882, when he found Clara's note. If someone had told him then that he would find happiness again, that he would build a life more fulfilling than anything he had imagined, he would not have believed them. But here he was, 21 years later, lying beside a woman who was his partner in every way, surrounded by children they had created together, living on land they had built into something remarkable. "What are you thinking about?" Diana asked, turning to face him in the darkness. "About how lucky I am. About how grateful I am that those wolves attacked your wagon." She laughed softly. "I think about that too sometimes, how one terrible moment led to the best thing that ever happened to me. Do you ever regret leaving Boston? Giving up the life you could have had there? Not for a single second. This is my life, Benjamin. You and our children and this ranch and this wild, beautiful desert. I would not trade it for anything." He pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her, feeling the solid reality of her in his arms. "I love you, Diana Preston, more now than even on the day I married you. And I love you, always and forever." They made love slowly, tenderly, the passion between them undimmed by 2 decades of marriage. And afterward, they lay tangled together, talking and laughing until they finally drifted off to sleep, secure in the knowledge that, whatever challenges tomorrow brought, they would face them together. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the milestones of their children's lives. In 1906, James fell in love with a young woman named Sarah, the daughter of a neighboring rancher. Benjamin and Diana approved heartily, and the wedding was held at the ranch in October, a joyous celebration that brought together families from all over the territory. Watching James marry Sarah, Benjamin was reminded of his own wedding to Diana, and he felt a profound satisfaction knowing that his son was starting his marriage with love and respect, not just convenience or social obligation. James and Sarah built a small house on the ranch property, and within a year, they had given Benjamin and Diana their first grandchild, a daughter named Emma. Being grandparents opened a new chapter in Benjamin and Diana's lives. They doted on Emma, spoiling her in ways they had never spoiled their own children, and Diana in particular seemed to bloom with the joy of having a grandchild. She would spend hours playing with Emma, reading to her, teaching her to draw, and Benjamin would watch them together with a heart full of love. Rose married in 1908, choosing a teacher from Prescott named Daniel, who shared her passion for education and art. Their wedding was smaller than James's, but no less meaningful, and Benjamin walked his daughter down the aisle with tears streaming down his face, overwhelmed by the realization that his little girl had grown into an extraordinary woman. Thomas, now 12, was developing into a fine young man despite his early wildness. He had his father's talent for working with animals and had already expressed interest in becoming a veterinarian, a new profession that was gaining respect in the territory. Benjamin encouraged this dream, knowing that the world was changing and his youngest son would need to find his own path. In 1909, Arizona Territory was moving closer to statehood, and Benjamin and Diana attended meetings and rallies, excited about the prospect of seeing their adopted home become a full part of the United States. They had lived through the tail end of the Wild West era, watching as the lawless days gave way to civilization, as towns grew and roads improved, and the territory became more connected to the rest of the country. "Do you miss the old days?" Diana asked Benjamin one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. It was something they did almost every evening, a ritual that had begun in the early days of their courtship and had never ended. "Sometimes," he admitted, "there was a freedom to those days, a sense that anything was possible. But I do not miss the danger, or the isolation, or the way justice was often just whoever had the fastest draw." He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "And I would not give up what we have now for anything. Indoor plumbing, electric lights, a telephone that connects us to the rest of the world. These are good things." "I agree. Though I will admit I sometimes miss the simplicity of those early days, when it was just you and me and the ranch." "It is still just you and me," Benjamin said softly. "Everything else is just details." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to crimson to deep purple as the stars began to emerge. After nearly 30 years together, they could communicate entire conversations without words, understanding each other on a level that transcended language. In 1912, Arizona finally achieved statehood, and the celebration in Camp Verde was the largest the town had ever seen. Benjamin was now 52 years old, his dark hair thoroughly shot through with silver, his body still strong, but bearing the marks of a lifetime of hard work. Diana was 55, her auburn hair fading to a softer shade, laugh lines around her eyes and mouth that Benjamin found more beautiful than any smooth young face. They had built something lasting together, not just the ranch, but a legacy of love and family that would extend far beyond their own lifetimes. James and Sarah now had 3 children and were successfully managing much of the daily operations of the ranch. Rose and Daniel had started a school in Prescott that was gaining recognition throughout the state. Thomas was away at university, studying veterinary medicine and writing long letters home about his classes and his dreams for the future. As Benjamin and Diana stood watching the statehood celebration, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, he felt a profound sense of completion. This was what life was supposed to be, not the fairy tale romance of storybooks, where everything was perfect and easy, but the real, messy, beautiful reality of 2 people choosing each other every day, building something meaningful through hard work and dedication and unwavering commitment. "We did it," Diana said softly, echoing his thoughts. "We built a life worth living." "We did," Benjamin agreed, "and I would not change a single moment of it." They stayed at the celebration for hours, dancing and laughing, and enjoying the company of friends and neighbors who had become like family over the years. When they finally returned home late that night, exhausted but happy, they fell into bed together, still holding hands, still finding comfort in each other's presence. The years that followed were gentler, marked by the slowing pace of age, but no less full of love. Benjamin gradually turned over more of the ranch operations to James, though he still worked every day, unable to imagine a life where he did not spend time with his horses and cattle. Diana continued teaching at the school she had founded, now run primarily by younger teachers, but still bearing her mark and vision. They traveled more, taking trips to visit Rose in Prescott and Thomas wherever his veterinary practice took him. They even made a trip to Boston, Diana's first return to her childhood home in over 30 years. The city had changed dramatically, and Diana found she had no desire to stay, preferring the wide-open spaces of Arizona to the crowded streets of the East Coast. In 1920, they celebrated their 37th wedding anniversary with a party that brought together their entire extended family. James and Sarah's children were now grown, some with children of their own, making Benjamin and Diana great-grandparents. Rose and Daniel had adopted 2 children and were running a successful school system that served hundreds of students. Thomas had married and opened a veterinary practice in Phoenix that was thriving. As Benjamin looked around at the gathering, at the family he and Diana had created, he felt tears of gratitude sliding down his face. This was his legacy, not cattle or land or money, but love. Love that had started from pain and betrayal, that had been nurtured through patience and understanding, that had grown into something vast and unshakable. Diana found him standing alone on the porch later that evening, looking out over the ranch that had been their home for nearly 40 years. She slipped her hand into his without a word, and they stood together in the comfortable silence of 2 people who had spent a lifetime learning each other. "Do you remember the day we met?" Benjamin asked. "Every detail. You rode over that hill like something out of a legend, your rifle firing, saving me from those wolves. I thought you were the most magnificent thing I had ever seen. I thought you were the bravest woman I had ever met, standing there with a broken rifle, refusing to give up even when you must have been terrified. I was terrified, but then you were there, and somehow I knew everything would be all right." Benjamin turned to face her, cupping her face in his hands the way he had done thousands of times over their years together. The face had changed, softened with age, but she was still the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what? For understanding my pain, for healing with me instead of from me, for choosing me every day for 37 years, for giving me a life I never thought I could have." Diana's eyes filled with tears. "You did the same for me. We saved each other, Benjamin, and we built something beautiful from the wreckage of our pasts." They kissed as the sun set over the Arizona desert, the same way they had kissed thousands of times before. But this time, it felt different. It felt like a culmination, a celebration of everything they had overcome and everything they had built. It felt like coming home. The party continued inside, their family laughing and singing and celebrating, but Benjamin and Diana stayed on the porch, holding each other, watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast night sky. They had been betrayed by the people they once loved, left broken and bleeding in the wreckage of failed marriages. But they had understood each other's pain, and in that understanding, they had found healing. More than that, they had found love. Real, lasting, transformative love that had carried them through nearly 4 decades and would carry them through whatever time they had left. They had started as 2 broken people in the Arizona desert, brought together by wolves and desperation and the simple human need for connection. They had become partners, lovers, friends, soulmates, the kind of couple that inspired others and gave hope to anyone who had ever suffered heartbreak. As the celebration wound down and their family began to leave, making their way back to their various homes across Arizona, Benjamin and Diana stood at the gate, waving goodbye to each child, grandchild, and great-grandchild. When the last wagon had disappeared down the road, they turned to each other and smiled. "Shall we go inside?" Diana asked. "In a moment. I want to remember this, all of it. The perfect end to a perfect day." "It has been a perfect life," Diana said. "Not easy, not without its challenges, but perfect because we faced everything together." They stood together in the doorway of their home, the house they had built with their own hands and filled with love and laughter. The moon rose over the desert, bathing everything in silver light, and Benjamin pulled Diana close, resting his chin on top of her head. "I love you, Diana Preston. From that first day until my last day, I will love you. And I love you, Benjamin Preston, my rescuer, my partner, my heart." They went inside together, closing the door on the night, secure in the knowledge that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it the same way they had faced everything for the past 37 years. Together, unified, their love a shelter against any storm. This was their legacy. Not just the ranch or the family or the life they had built, but the proof that love could bloom even in the harshest desert, that broken hearts could heal and become stronger than they were before, that betrayal and pain did not have to define a person's story. Benjamin and Diana had taken their pain and transformed it into something beautiful, something lasting, something worth celebrating. And as they lay down to sleep that night, wrapped in each other's arms, as they had been every night for nearly 4 decades, They both knew with absolute certainty that they had found exactly what they were meant to find. Not perfection, but partnership. Not rescue, but mutual healing. Not a fairy tale, but something better. A real, messy, beautiful love story that had stood the test of time. The end.